Hi everyone, this is Jim. I wanted to take a look at traditional opening theory from the point of view of what the modern AIs have to say about it. So I'm using Katago as a reference. That's the engine that's currently the strongest one that I can run on my machine. So this set of rules represents one way of looking at the traditional opening theory. I got these rules from the Yilun Yang book, Fundamental Principles of Go, but I think they're fairly consistent with other rule sets. There's maybe slight nuances here. So let's take a minute and explain them. Take an open corner is a top priority. And in general, what these rules are a ranking of the most or the largest moves. What are the biggest moves in a position? So it doesn't mean they're the moves you always want to play because you may be in the middle of a fight or something. But if things have kind of calmed down on the board and you're looking for where the next biggest move is, these are your priorities. So taking an open corner if there's no corner that's settled, approaching or enclosing an unbalanced corner. This is another concept to keep in mind. There's a distinction here between an unbalanced corner and a balanced corner. So a balanced corner is a corner where there's one 4-4 stone or one 3-3 stone. So a stone that's on the diagonal there. And they're not as valuable, or at least the theory was, they're not as valuable to approach because they can just go out the other side. They're balanced. Whereas an unbalanced corner, you have a preferred way to approach it, and it has a definite direction to it, and you can take advantage of that. So approaching an unbalanced corner, it's a corner where there's a 3-4 stone, a 4-5 stone, a 5-3 stone, anything that's just off of the 3-3 or the 4-4. So after that, so you first approach or enclose one of those unbalanced corners. The next level down is playing the midpoint of a side with two facing positions. So if you have a corner with an enclosure, that enclosure faces one side of the board or the other, and so it's exerting more influence in that direction. And if you have two corners which are adjacent to each other and they're both facing the same side, then playing the midpoint of that side is a strong move. If those two facing positions belong to your opponent, then that's a splitting move. You're splitting up that side. And if you own one of those corners that's facing that side, then you're making a big extension from your corner, which is also a valuable move. And then also at level 2, yeah, the way this is categorized, there was like priority 1, there was priority 2, and then within priority 2, there were 3 different levels, and the same for priority 3 and priority 4. There were different levels within that, but in general, the priority 2 things happen before the priority 3 things, and there's slight preference between, say, 2A and 2B or 2B and 2C. Anyway, 2C here is playing out a joseki. So if your corner is approached, you shouldn't ignore it, but you should play it out. Choose a joseki and play it out. Sometimes you want to pincer, sometimes you want to back off, sometimes you want to attach. Down at level 3, there's playing the midpoint of a side where only one of the positions is facing that side. There is playing an extension that reduces an opponent. Now, by extension here, I mean a small extension, like a 2-space extension. This kind of extension, though, is particularly valuable if you imagine you have a position in the corner that you can extend by 2 spaces, and or with a 2-space extension, and at the same time your opponent is on the other side. He has a position already there, and you're reducing his ability to make that same extension. So it has like double value. It's not only builds your territory, but it reduces your opponent's territory by the same amount. Then 3C is approaching or enclosing a balanced corner. This is the 4-4 or the 3-3 stone. And then down at level 4 here, we have playing the midpoint of the side where neither corner is facing in that direction, or finishing a 4-4 corner. That is playing a third stone in a corner after you've got already an enclosure. You can play a third stone there, and that completely secures the corner and turns it into territory. Or approaching a 4-4 corner that already has an enclosure, but approaching it in a way to try and reduce it, to keep it from expanding. Or just playing a simple extension. This is an extension from a corner like a 2-space extension, but where there's nothing on the other side, or it's your own territory, there's either nothing there or your own pieces on the other side. So you're not cutting into your opponent's territory when you play it. So that's the smallest kind of extension. So this keeps with the general rule. If you've heard corners, sides, center, and also Nick Sabicki, when he talks about opening theory, he talks about playing the big extension and then playing the small extension. What he's talking about with the big extension is what I called playing the midpoint of the side. So I think this is a fairly common position, that these are the priorities you should have in an opening and when you're looking for big moves. So let's take a look at this with Katago, and we'll start at the top. So let's turn on the analysis here, and right away we see that it prefers, the green here is where it's most likely to move, and then the numbers are the winning probability if you play that move, what it thinks the winning probabilities are. So notice, first of all, it doesn't matter too much if you're playing a 4-4, a 4-3, or a 3-4. Does not like the 3-3 so much, or the 5-4s, but the top three choices here, the 4-4 and the 2-3-4 points. So let's put a stone there, and put a stone over here, put a stone over here, and the last one you want to go for an open corner. Here, let's back up. I want to do something slightly different. I wanted to put an unbalanced stone here and say, should you still go for the open corner? And the answer is yes. So it's filling in an open corner has preference over approaching an unbalanced corner. So that's in keeping with the rules too. There was one interesting wrinkle right here. After 2 4-4 points have been played, there is a possibility of black could do an approach here. And the idea is, if you look at the sequence that got played out, oh, it's still going to play. Okay, now it stopped. After black played that approach to the corner, there were still 2 open corners left, right? This corner and this corner were both open. So it means that black, after this is played, is still going to get one of those corners. So yeah, let's just play it out to there. So actually you can throw in this approach, and you're not giving up a corner. You're keeping open the possibility that you still get 2 corners, and so you stay even with your opponent, and you get that approach move in. So that's why it's interesting. It's considering it. When I let this run a little longer, eventually it changed its mind and went back to just taking the corner. But you see at first blush that those 2 moves are kind of equal, and you can see that. So I think that's kind of an interesting wrinkle there. But I won't call that a bust to opening theory. That's all within the range of what's about even. And then let's look at unbalanced corners versus balanced corners. So if black makes another balanced corner and white makes an unbalanced corner by playing either here or here, where should black approach? And now we see, actually, I think one of the first differences between traditional opening theory and what the AI opinion is. You'll see that actually it likes approaching the balanced corner nearly as much as it likes approaching the unbalanced corner. It might decide to go for the unbalanced corner after a while, after thinking about it for a bit, but it definitely is placing a higher priority on approaching the unbalanced corner than what we saw in traditional opening theory. Now there's another way, that's the approach. There's also the enclosure. So let's look at, let's create an unbalanced position here for black and a balanced position for white. So now it's black's move, and black has a choice of approaching white where there are balanced corners, or enclosing the unbalanced corner, and it definitely prefers approaching the unbalanced corner. So I would say overall this is still a win for opening theory, that unbalanced corners do have this preference over balanced corner in general, and if you have an unbalanced one you can enclose. It's preferable to enclose it rather than approaching in a balanced corner. And if you have an unbalanced corner you can approach, it's preferable to approaching that, to either enclosing one of your corners which is balanced, or approaching a balanced corner, although it's pretty close to even in that case, as we saw. So let's call this one confirmed. And let's call this one confirmed. Those seem to be high priority items in the opinion of Katago as well. Okay, let's take a look at these next rules, though. This is where some of the differences are going to come out more strongly. So I created a few test cases to test out this the value of this playing a midpoint of a side with the facing position. So let's take a look at this first one. So it's black's turn to move here. Both sides have played 3 stones. Black has an unbalanced corner that's not complete, and white has an unbalanced corner that's not complete as well. And then on the left side here, you can see that both positions are facing the left side. So the split would have a fairly high priority according to traditional opening theory, but the unbalanced corners would have even higher priority. So let's turn on the analysis and see what it thinks. And it agrees. So we see here that there's a preference to approach the unbalanced corner, and it's also got a preference to enclose its own unbalanced corner, although it seems to like approaching rather than enclosing, but we'll call that a small difference. Let's back up and let's create a similar situation, but with a balanced corner here. Yeah, instead of white playing there, say white plays here. And let's go forward. Black encloses, white encloses, so we get this facing side. So now there's only one unbalanced corner that's not complete, right? This one is balanced. These corners are completed or enclosed. And yeah, definitely you should take that unbalanced corner and enclose it. It is starting to think about some splitting type moves here, but it's actually looking at approaches more than it is looking at splits here. But so far, this is all in accordance with theory. So, but I created another test case here, which tries to look at whether we should split or approach when you have only balanced corners that are available. And this is where you get the first real difference with traditional opening theory. We see that Katago would approach a balanced corner or enclose a balanced corner, and it really significantly favors that over splitting. You can see it is thinking about a splitting move. It could play a splitting move anywhere in this area, and it gives that about a 54% probability. So it's still a reasonable move to play. It's not like it's out of the ballpark, but it's showing a definite preference for approaching a balanced point. So I think we can definitely say that the AIs are putting a higher priority on approaching even balanced corners. They just like approaching the corners better than they like splitting, whether the corner is balanced or unbalanced. They prefer unbalanced corners to approach or enclose them over balanced corners, but they prefer any kind of corner over a big extension on the side. So let's look at one more case. I tried to create a case here where I put enough stones down that Katago would no longer find it attractive to approach any of the corners, and it would finally go for the split. And in this position, it is black's turn to move. Well, not a split. In this case, it's going for a big extension. This is a nice move. At the top, it provides a large extension from both corners. So, I would naturally be attracted to it. And, I had to put in a lot of stones here to make it not want to approach these corners. But even so, it still wants to approach this corner over here. And it rates it almost equally. You can see the probabilities are the same, and also the number of playouts is pretty similar. I think it gradually over time starts to favor the split. But it does approaching or doing a shoulder hit on an enclosed corner is something that rates nearly as highly as playing a big move like this extension here. So I think that is pretty interesting. So let's go back to our list here. I think we can say this one is busted. I think if we look at where it fits in terms of the priorities, It belongs somewhere down around somewhere in category 4. It's below approaching or enclosing a balanced corner. Or maybe the other way to look at it, this should be raised in higher priority. Next, I wanted to take a look at Rule 2C here and see where it fits in this hierarchy of possible moves. So Rule 2C is responding to an approach or playing out a joseki, and we'll compare this with playing on the midpoint of a side with facing positions. We'll compare it to approaching or enclosing an unbalanced corner, and also we'll compare it to approaching or enclosing a balanced corner. Because as we saw, the balanced corner, although it's not quite as high a priority as an unbalanced corner, it is rated by Katago at least as a higher priority than, for example, playing the midpoint of a side. So I created a couple of cases to test this out. Let's look at the first one here. So this is a situation where, yeah, both sides have played 3 stones, so it's black's turn to move. White has just approached a black stone, which is a balanced stone. It's sitting here at the 4 point. Black has 1 enclosure, and white has 2 balanced stones. And so the question is, what is black's best move here? Should he respond to the approach, or should he approach one of the 2 corners there that are balanced? So let's turn on the analysis. And we'll see that actually responding to the approaching stone is the preference of the AI. And it will play out the joseki. So if you just hold that, it'll play out the sequence of moves it expects. So it plays out a joseki here. It doesn't immediately jump away to a corner until after that is played out. And it also considers a pincer here as a reasonable option, and it'll play that joseki. Actually, it plays away from that one pretty quickly. So that's an interesting point, that the AIs don't always play a joseki out completely the way that humans used to do, and will sometimes play away. But in this case, it's pretty clear that it wants to respond to this stone, and it gives that a priority over approaching a balanced corner. So let's back up, and let's put one of these stones on a 4-3 point. So we have an unbalanced corner to look at. Now black closes here, and white approaches just as before. So all the other stones are in the same spot. And here you see it's shifted, and now instead of responding being the top priority, actually approaching the unbalanced corner is the top priority. And this is also in fitting with the hierarchy that Yilun Yang presented. So far, the traditional opening theory is winning out here. And I created a couple of cases to look at the situation of splitting a side. So let's go forward, and we'll see at this point, it's actually black's turn to move here. And black already could jump into this side. You can see it's considering that a little bit, but it prefers to enclose even a balanced corner over splitting a side. I think we saw that before. The question is, suppose black, instead of enclosing, approaches, and there's 2 ways to approach. We can look at this one first. He approaches white's stone here. The question is, how does white respond? Does he respond by playing a joseki, and that's what it looks like should happen here, versus splitting the side? So definitely responding to the approach is preferred here. And notice we see the jump into the 3-3 starting to rear its head here is also an option for white at this point. And then let's see, the other way to approach is black could have approached from this side, from on top. And also we see that jumping in, responding to the approach is given priority over splitting the side. So that fits with what we've seen so far. And let's go back and look at the next one. So if let's give this a confirmed here. And I think I'm ready to promote this rule 3C up to 2C, promote 2C to 2B, and then demote playing the midpoint of a side down here somewhere. So the next thing I want to look at is playing an extension that reduces an opponent and compare that to the to this playing of midpoints. I created a couple of cases to take a look at the relative value of playing an extension that reduces your opponent's area, rule 3b. So let's check this out. In this position, let's go to this one first. So white has just played the big extension. We can see here that white has an enclosure plus an extension here. Black has an enclosure and a 4-4 stone plus an extension, and white has a 4-4 stone. So it's this is a place where a small extension seems pretty logical here. You can extend from the corner here, playing at this point, and it also limits the expansion of white on this side, so it's a dual purpose expansion, so it's a pretty valuable one. But there is also a stone, a balanced corner that's not enclosed that could be approached here. So let's take a look at this. And we see pretty quickly it likes approaching the stone here. Now maybe also this is, notice that the percentages are fairly close, like it's 54%, so it's definitely considering this move. And this is 54% the approach on this side, but 55% this is slightly favored. You know, it's hard to get a clean test of some of these more complicated positions because it's, I think, pretty clear this stone down here is having an influence. Because the way the approach on this side is preferred, this stone is working with the other stone to build some kind of territory on the bottom. So that seems to be pretty well preferred. So I guess this is kind of close to an approach, but the approach in this particular case is favored. I looked at one other example here. Let's take a look at this. So it's pretty similar, but I put this stone on an unbalanced corner, and then I completed the enclosure. So now black has a choice between playing this extension, or, you know, that's a small extension, but it has a dual purpose of expanding the corner and reducing white. Or black could play a big extension here, which also is a dual purpose move. It's splitting this facing side, blocking the extension of white and creating a big extension for black. So let's turn that on. And we'll see that now it's pretty strongly favoring the small extension here. So it likes that over the split. It does actually play the, I shouldn't call that a split. It does actually play the large extension after it gets a response, but it goes with this move first. It goes with the small extension first. So actually this confirms what Yilun Yang was saying in his list. So let's call this one confirmed. With the understanding that this rule 3C has been promoted up to a class 2 move. And this one is busted because if you shouldn't play the midpoint of a side with two facing positions, then if there's only one facing position, it has even less value. So this also is getting demoted. And so we can start to think about reordering this list. If we promote rule 3C up to category 2 here, we push these midpoint moves down to category 4. Well, then we have this in category 3 we only have this one thing here, which is the extension that reduces an opponent. So I guess the last thing to compare is if you're playing the midpoint of a side of any kind versus a small extension with or without one that doesn't reduce your opponent, or finishing off a 4-4 enclosure or approaching an enclosed corner. So let's see if we can find a way to test that. Okay, this is the final example. I tried to create a couple of cases to test out where these extensions go relative to playing on the midpoint of sides. And I also got an opportunity to look at this reduce an enclosed corner or finish a corner. They just turn up in the examples almost out of necessity. It's kind of hard to create some of these conditions without creating others. So here, let's go to the example. So this is the first one. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. Black has got a 3-4 enclosure and a 4-4 with an enclosure, and has played an extension here, a large extension, which is splitting the side and it's acting as an extension off of both sides. I'm not sure why I put the stone there instead of in the middle. That was probably a misclick. Anyway, white has two 4-4 enclosures, and then also a big extension here. So there are various moves that black could consider. For example, the small extension would be a 2-space jump off of this stone here. Would be a nice territorial move. Another small extension would be a 2-space jump off of this stone, which would also be reducing white's territory or influence on the side, so that might have extra value. There's also an extension on this side, which would, it doesn't hamper white from extending, so that's probably just a one-sided move. There's also the split over here. White or black could consider playing in between these stones. This is facing the side and this is not facing. So this is a case of playing in the midpoint of a side where only one of the two corners is facing that side. But that was still pretty highly prioritized in the original list. So let's turn on the AI there and see what it thinks. And what it thinks is none of those above, none of the above. It likes approaching the enclosed corner. So that was actually mentioned. That was on the list. It was just down a little bit lower. But this is approaching an already enclosed corner in order to reduce it. And that is actually the engine's top priority in this case. It is considering, notice this extension here is a priority that it's considering. It's only a couple of percentage points behind, so I'm sure it's still a fine move, because it is it's building the territory on this side and it's limiting what white can do with these stones on the bottom. So it is a dual purpose move. But it's just interesting that enclosing the corner, approaching an enclosed corner is the top priority in this case among those choices. Notice that all the corners were enclosed, so there were no unbalanced corners or corners with only one stone in them to approach. So it just really likes approaching corners even when they are enclosed. So I was wondering if this was something specific to the 4-4 point and the knight's move enclosure, or if this applied to other enclosures as well. So I created another case here where white's enclosures, it's very similar to the previous case, but this time I put white's enclosures on the 3-4 point. So these are very solid enclosures. They can't, you can't really take that territory away. Black has two 4-4 knight's moves enclosures and an extension here out to the midpoint. And I played this extension here for white. I played this off by one for a reason, because I wanted to give black a clean 2-space extension here, which without being too close to this stone. So this is a very attractive move. This 2-space extension here clearly expands black's territory and reduces the amount that white can expand. So that seems like a nice dual purpose move. The split, the midpoint, playing the midpoint here seems pretty strong as well. It will enhance this side, which is facing, we have one corner that's facing this side, so playing in the midpoint would enhance that, but it also works with these stones over here. So that also seems like a candidate move. So where does the engine play? The engine plays down here. So once again, it wants to reduce those corners. And it actually prioritizes that above playing either the big extension or the small extension. So I think that completes the set of tests that I wanted to run. And so now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reorder this list and show you what it looks like with Katago's opinions taken into account. After taking those results into account, I came up with this new list. And So it starts off the same. The first class move is to take an open corner. If there's an open corner, you should take it. There is that little exception that if there's two open corners available, you can throw in an approach move because you'll still get one of them. But when you do that, you're actually giving the choice to your opponent of which open corner to take. So you might prefer to take one or the other, depending on if you want to rule out a cross Hoshi game, a cross game, or whether you want to allow it. Anyway, second class moves. You can approach or enclose an unbalanced corner. You can respond to an approach and play out a joseki, or you can approach or enclose a balanced corner. And approaching or enclosing the unbalanced corner is slightly more important than responding to the joseki, which is slightly more important than approaching or enclosing a balanced corner. Then in the third class of moves, we have reducing an enclosed corner. So this was on the list, but it got promoted. It's a lot higher on the list now than it used to be. And we see that even if it's not a corner with a 4-4, even if it's a 3-4 corner enclosure, the AI still wants to play a move that reduces that. And then rule 3b, at the same level, but maybe a little bit below it, is playing an extension that simultaneously reduces your opponent. And here I'm talking about a small extension, like a 2 or 3 space extension that grows your corner and impacts what your opponent can do. Then in the fourth category of moves, we have playing the midpoints of sides. So, and it's slightly more important if there's two facing positions. You should play that. That's higher priority than playing the midpoint of a side where only one corner faces that side, or playing on the mid, and that's higher priority than playing the midpoint of a side that has no facing positions. And then finally, at level 5, we have moves like playing an ordinary extension where there's no other fringe benefits to it, or finishing off a 4-4 corner, playing a third move in a corner. And by the time you get down to these moves here, typically there's a lot going on the board. So usually this all comes with the caveat that you need to respond to what's going on the board. You can't just randomly break away and play big moves. These are big moves that you can think about playing when the position is settled down. You've finished playing out a joseki or a sequence of moves, and things are relatively calm, and then you want to look around and see what the big moves are. And this seems to be the AI's point of view of what the big moves are. So anyway, this was kind of a fun exercise. Hopefully you don't take this too seriously. I mean, it's important to notice that, playing moves in slightly different priorities made only a 1 or 2% difference in the expected outcome of the game, which at my level, and I assume at your level too, that's not really going to affect the game when every move in the mid game, causes swings of 20 or 30 points. So you shouldn't really be controlled by this kind of list. And in particular, playing into the midpoint of a side is something that's very appealing because it prevents your opponent from building up a big side there. So there may be a value to playing these moves in that it gets you into positions that you find easier to play. If you play these complicated, corner josekis and you allow your opponent to build up huge amounts of influence, that can be a hard problem to deal with later. But at the same time, this is the point of view of the AI, what it thinks the big moves are. So I think that's worth considering as you're trying to improve your own play. And of course, you can take this list and you can run your own test cases. Katago is free software, and I'll put a pointer to my video at the end of this one on how to set up Katago with Sabaki, and you can try out some of these cases for yourself. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you later. Bye.